It was a busy few days, but the Eagles did it. They got through the 2025 draft, and so did we, Rube.
Yeah, it's always a fun few days, filled with surprises, and this is really like they can talk all they want about different things at different positions of players, but this is when you really see what their priorities are, and we got a good glimpse into the Eagles' long-range plan over these last few days.
Yeah, I think that's true. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. A busy day 3 for the Eagles. They drafted just 2 players through the first 2 days of the draft, and then they draft 8 players on day 3. So we're going to go through all of those individually in a few minutes. But when you look at this draft class as a whole, Rube, and we can go through the names later, but obviously Jahad Campbell at the top of the list, the first round pick, Andrew uh, Mukuba. I had to think about how to say his name there. Second round pick, Ty Robinson, closest thing they had to a third round pick after they traded out. What are your biggest takeaways from this class?
Yeah, and then the next couple picks in the fifth round, Mac McWilliams and Smile Mondin Jr. So you're talking about the first 5 picks for defense, and I knew it was going to be a defensive heavy draft. I didn't know it was going to be that exaggerated, I guess. And Howie said, we were following our board, but look, they lost a lot of defensive players, some really good ones, some medium, and they had to fill these spots. And they signed all those kind of low budget free agents, I guess, as an emergency backup plan. But they want this group of defensive players to be kind of that next generation of young Eagle stars. And this whole defense is just built around the draft. And, other than a couple guys, I mean, Zach Bond was a free agent. But I mean, this is a homegrown defense. And out of Howie's had, let's see if I can get the math right. I can't get the math right because I forgot it, but 21 picks in the first 5 rounds in the last 4 drafts. 16 of those players have been on defense. And it's the same if you go the first 4 rounds, first 3 rounds. The only offensive players they've drafted in the first 4 rounds in the last 4 drafts are Tyler Steen and Cam Jurgens, 2 interior linemen. So you see what the plan is. And this is all part of, we're going to let Sweat go. We're going to let Milton go. We can't afford these guys. We're going to cut Slay. We're going to let right down the line, every defensive guy, Avonte Maddox we know the names. And this was the flip side of that plan. We're going to replace them with young rookie deal guys that we believe in. And if he hit on this group at the same rate he hit on the last 4 drafts, then the plan worked to perfection. They've replenished, they've restocked on defense. They're all set on offense. I mean, they've got, there's not a lot of room for players. Maybe you want to right guard there, but defense is where they needed to address. And as many times as Howie can say the board dictated who we picked, this draft was all about defense.
Yeah, and I don't think they would have, not taken an offensive tackle or maybe even a tight end with one of those first 5 picks if the board did fall that way. But like when you're scanning out a little bit, obviously you have to draft defense, and it also, you look at what they have on offense, and it's like they're pretty set. And they have, when Howie talks about all those big contracts, the guys making 15 plus million per season, like, yeah, most of them are on the offensive side of the football. So, and you also have fewer rotational positions on offense. You know what I mean? Like all the starting offensive linemen don't rotate. The quarterback doesn't rotate. The running back doesn't really rotate. The tight end, if you have a tight end one, doesn't really rotate. The receivers, you have 2 really good ones. They're not coming off the field. Whereas on defense, the defensive line, those guys are in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, it's something like the offensive payroll is twice the defensive payroll right now. And Spotrac, I'm sure Over the Cap breaks it down the same way. They have the highest payroll for offense, and they're 31st in defense. So you see how it's built. And I mean, they've drafted so well on defense. I mean, he's drafted well everywhere in a lot of spots, but defensively, I mean, and that's afforded him, no pun intended, the ability to have these cheap guys. Now it's going to catch up to him soon, and you're going to have to start paying some of these guys. But right now, going into this season, that's the way the roster is constructed. He had a plan, he had this plan, and I'm sure halfway through last year, that plan had, even before they started the postseason run, he knew what had to be done, and he carried it out. And the first step is letting those guys go, cutting them, trading them, whatever it is. CJ. The next step is getting those insurance type of guys in here on cheap contracts, and then the third step is drafting to replace them for the long run. And all those steps have to fit together, and I think he's done a marvelous job of fitting them together.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that it's not like this plan started now. They've been drafting these defensive players, and I'm curious to see how it goes over the next few years, because the pendulum's going to have to swing a little bit, because they're going to have to pay the Jalen Carters and Nolan Smiths, all these guys that they drafted who are playing so well, eventually Quinion and Cooper. And I'm kind of fascinated to see where the roster construction goes when it's time to do that, but it's not time to do that yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it's almost like he's a prisoner of his own drafting success, because that's the only way you get yourself into this position where you can't afford to keep all your own good players, is if you have too many of them to fit under the cap. And you want to pay them, you want to give them fair contracts. They're not going to take them if they're not. So it's really tricky. And now you look at the guys coming up on defense, and a couple on offense, and it's going to be tricky. But I mean, right now this roster is loaded. I mean, this is a top 3 roster in the league right now. So they're not going away.
That's another kind of big picture thing that I have in mind. It's not a major criticism. It's just something I'm a little curious about. They drafted 10 players, 8 of them on day 3. This was already a really talented roster.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how many of these guys are going to make the team.
Yeah, it's a fair question. And Howie himself had said, we just don't have that many spots. And then he starts accumulating picks in this year's draft. He might be thinking like, 4 of the guys from today are going to be on the practice squad. I mean, they look at that as an extension of the roster. You can lose those guys as well. So,
a la Dylan McMahon last year.
Yeah. Yeah. So that surprised me as well. That surprised me that after all the build up about we don't have that many roster spots, that he added picks and added more players than were originally slated.
Yeah, and I guess that's the way he saw the value in this draft. But I kind of expected them to make more of an effort to trade up in certain situations. The only trade up was the one spot in round 1, just to ensure that they got Jahad Campbell. I understand why they didn't make the massive trade up in round 2, but I thought maybe a little trade up in round 2, and then the trade out of round 3, I thought was, like, in the grand scheme of things, kind of surprising. He has all the benefit of the doubt in the world right now. So I don't want to act like I'm really critical here, but I am surprised that there wasn't more of an effort to really target key players, trade up and get them. I don't know what their board looked like. Maybe he's telling the truth. Like, their board just did not dictate that, or maybe the price was too high in those certain situations to move up, or maybe there were teams who were saying, like, we don't want to trade down. We want to stay here. And the Eagles, a lot of their ammo isn't just this year. It's next year, where they have all these picks. Maybe teams don't want the pick next year to move up.
Yeah, and I mean, those are all valid reasons. I'm guessing, and I think he alluded to this, is that the price was just too high, which you kind of think of that in the first round, but he started talking about what people were asking in the second round, and it just was too much to move up where it would have made a difference. So, but all those things surprised me as well.
Yeah, it was just something like, if you were to ask me, would they make more trade ups or trade downs, I probably would have said trade ups, and they'd leave with fewer players than they had picks going in, and the opposite happened.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of it, like as well as you can be prepared for the draft, I wonder if they ever feel like Howie's a veteran GM, so maybe he doesn't. But some of these new GMs, they have to feel like they're like in the ocean and the waves keep coming because like the draft doesn't stop for you. You can't pause it. Everything's happening. I wonder if they ever feel like they're getting like drowned a little bit.
I think it's got to be a really difficult thing for a new GM, unless you got really veteran, number two guy, director of personnel or whatever it is. Because, Howie's been doing this for 15 years. I think it was just his 15th year, 15th draft. And I think it really only in the last few years has he really had that, I think, mastery over all those things that keep coming at you and just knowing what to expect, knowing what's going to happen, knowing how other teams think, understanding the value of picks and spots. So for a new GM, yeah, I think that's got to be really, really tough. And that's why Howie has such an advantage. I mean, he's been doing this so long. He's gotten so much better at so many parts of it over the years, that it's a real advantage. And he uses it to his advantage because there's been times where he takes advantage of other teams that don't understand these things as well as he does.
Yeah, I think that's all true. You want to go through the picks from today?
Yeah.
All right. So the Eagles they draft Andrew Makuba, 64th overall, and then their next pick ended up not being until the 4th round because they made us wait around all night Friday night till 96, and they traded back to 101, and then they moved out of the round completely. So they had one of the early picks, top 10, in the 4th round to start day 3. They stick and pick at 111, Ty Robinson, defensive tackle from Nebraska.
Yeah, and big dude, and is going to have a real chance to play for this team. And obviously, there's reps there to be taken. And we talked to him on a Zoom call, and I loved his attitude. I loved his approach, and we'll see where it takes him.
Yeah, 6'5", 288 pounds. Older prospect, which is something they don't normally like to do, especially in the trenches. It was one question I had on my list that I didn't get in to Howie, but turns 24 in just a couple of days. So typically that position, you're wary of an older prospect because they're able to kind of physically beat up on competition. And he really kind of exploded in 2024. He had his best season, 7 sacks, 12 and a half tackles for loss. He had just 5 sacks and 16 TFLs in his career before then. So kind of really broke out this past year.
Yeah, he did. And that's probably the biggest surprise about the pick. I think when you're doing it in the first round, it's a lot riskier with a 26-year-old guard than a 23-year-old defensive tackle. But that was the one surprise about this pick. I think he's got a chance to be a player, though.
Yeah, I do too. And I really do like his play style. He was one of the names I had on the list of possible targets in day 3. And look, we talked about how deep this defensive tackle group was. I think this is where you find the value in that because you're able to get a guy who was really productive at a key position, is a penetrating interior defensive lineman. Like this guy in most drafts probably doesn't last to 111, but there were so many defensive tackles taken before him, really good players that I think that's where you find the value here.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's something we talked about that, when you have this many guys going in the first round, it's going to push guys down. There might be years where he was a 2nd round pick, I think more likely a 3rd round pick, but Howie's always looking for those bargains and those guys that are better than where they're going to end up getting picked. And he's one of them.
Yeah, kind of a crazy athlete. At the combine at 288 pounds, ran a 4.83, which is, I mean, that's scooting, man. That's moving pretty fast. Relative athletic score, which is basically just like a composite of all the testing metrics. 9.89, which ranks 24 out of over 2,000 defensive tackles in the database, which goes back to 1987. So we're talking about like a really high percentage athlete, which is something the Eagles do care about, especially at certain positions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a word we've heard how many times this weekend? There's a type. I mean, Howie has a type, and um, he wants guys that can run. He wants guys that are athletic. He wants, obviously, there's the non-football stuff that he wants, and Nick, all this goes for Nick as well. And he checks all those boxes.
Another Senior Bowl guy too, had a good showing in Mobile. A lot of these picks, like the Eagles, really do value the Senior Bowl a lot. It's a great opportunity to see guys against top competition in different positions, doing different things. Like even Quinyon Mitchell last year played a bunch of off coverage, didn't really get the press much at Toledo. He goes to the Senior Bowl, shows he can press a little bit, and like it helps complete the evaluations. So whenever we talk about Senior Bowl, it's for a reason.
Yeah, Howie made this is unrelated to defense, but he was talking about how hard it is to find centers because they took Drew Kendall. We'll get to that, but he said they at the Senior Bowl, you see in the All-Star games, you see all these guards trying to snap the ball and they can't do it. And he's like, we're not that guy's. He might be able to block as a center, but big part of playing a center is he says it's an unnatural thing, and a lot of guys can't do it. So they're not going to take a guard center who can't snap the ball. So it just tells you it's just another way that those All-Star games are important because guys are always going to play positions that they don't usually play because they're trying to show they're versatile. They're trying to show what they can do. So I had never thought about that, but it was a good little nugget from Howie.
Yeah, that was good. There was another one. So it doesn't always work in your favor. Josh Connerly, trying to show he can play right tackle, ended up on like a highlight reel bad play. It happens, right? Like it's just a thing, and you're trying to prove yourself, and sometimes you're not going to look great at a new position. You have to take that risk.
Yeah.
Robinson, we talked to him, which was a fun chat with him. He was a pre-med student, graduated, and then he said he was able to kind of focus on football, which really helped him. And that makes sense.
Yeah, I asked him about that challenge of being pre-med and also playing in a high caliber football program. And I guess he said during COVID, he thought, well, we're not going to have a football season, so I'm going to take 19 credits, knock out some classes here. And then they obviously added the curtailed season. But he said, now I'm like, I'm trying to get ready for football games and taking on this crazy course load. But he said, he got through it. And he said they have sports psychologists that helped them get through it, which was interesting that he got a lot out of that. Interesting guy, wants to be a pediatric doctor after he retires, which he hopes isn't for a while, but very laudable. He said kids just seem to like him. Guess kids like big football player looking dudes. But interesting guy. You don't get a lot of pre-med. You look, all the draft guys have the players majors. You don't see a lot of pre-med in there.
Not a lot. There are some. Yeah, we made a big deal about Nakobe Dean being an engineering major.
Yeah. Smart dude.
Yep. I'll tease a story I have coming up next week. I had a chance to talk to his defensive line coach at Nebraska, who's actually Terrence Knighton, former NFL defensive tackle, pot roast. It really helped him get ready. And Robinson's talked about
I'm just going to interrupt you because we're walking down to the from the media house at the NovaCare down to the main building, and Dave's like, I was just talking to pot roast. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I wasn't familiar with the nickname. So
it's one of the great nicknames.
It's a good one.
Yeah. But he said, Robinson's said how much Knighton helped him get better and helped him reach his potential as a pass rusher. The interesting thing I got from Knighton, and it's probably going to be the big part of the story, is just how fierce Robinson is on the field. Like just really nice guy off the field, but he's got like a really nasty side to him. And he said like at times he has to like tone it down a little bit. He's so competitive and plays with such a mean streak.
Yeah, I think Howie, Howie was kind of getting really giddy talking about that and just saying how much Eagles fans are going to like watching this guy play. So, yeah, maybe we might even get a fight on day one of training camp.
Yeah, I mean that's what Knighton told me. He's like, you watch if anyone's mixing it up, he'll be in the middle of it.
I like that.
Yeah, so when the beats are we're sitting around training camp, and we're all making bets on who's gonna be in the first fight. I have a little inside info that might help me now.
Who's he going to fight? Who's his first skirmish with?
Have to be so the most common skirmishes are always between like a young player and a veteran who's over it, and it's normally like a veteran who's on the fringe, maybe like a I don't know, like a Kendall Lamb.
Okay.
I don't know Kendall Lamb at all, so that's going out on a limb
Hey,
for me.
if you're right, I will remember that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about who else would be maybe like a Kenyon Green.
Yeah.
I could see that. Ty Robinson versus Kenyon Green in training camp.
Okay.
Mark that down. I said it on April 26th.
I'm going to remember it.
All right, 5th round pick. So actually, I did want to hit this. The Eagles had pick 130 in the 4th round. And just a few picks before this, it was interesting to me, and I don't have any information here. The Colts took Jalen Travis, the big offensive tackle from Iowa State. And after that pick, they moved out, and the Jets moved up to take who did they take? Malachi Moore from Alabama, the safety. I think there was a chance Travis was their guy in that spot.
Could be.
So they moved down.
We'll never know.
Yeah, they moved down to pick 145. But before we get to pick 145, I do want to mention the Cleveland Browns traded up to pick 144 right before the Eagles and finally drafted Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, that's where I had him going in my Browns, 7-round draft, mock draft. I had Shedeur going right there. Who knows? I think we'll hear a lot more in the coming weeks about what happened and why. I still like the player. They got a lot of quarterbacks.
They do. Ultimately, I think that's a good landing spot for him.
I do too. Yeah, I think he's going to have a chance to. Nothing against our old friend Kenny Pickett from Ocean Township, but I think he's going to have a chance to be pretty good there.
The reason I brought it up though is that they trade a pick in front of the Eagles. On its face, it looks like they're trying to get in front of the Eagles to draft Sanders. Was that your read on it?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think this morning I said to you, how far would he have to drop before Howie snags him? I think we both
I was driving
maybe,
to the facility today thinking about it. Like at a certain point, the value is there. And then the
right.
Eagles end up drafting a quarterback. So it's not like, I think it's very possible if that he was on their radar and they would have drafted him.
Ron Wolf used to draft quarterbacks. I mean, when he had Brett Favre, and he would keep drafting quarterbacks. I mean, Kurt Warner, he didn't get drafted, but he started there. There's so many of them that they ended up playing great in preseason. And then they would trade him for like 4th round pick. And the guy never played because Favre played every game. Who was the guy who went to Jacksonville? But there's something, quarterback factory. They would love to develop a quarterback. I mean, Tanner McKee, I think he's got some trade value. He's played 1 game. So you develop young guys. You have good quarterback coaches, offensive coaches, and smart guy. He plays well in the preseason, has some value. Shedeur's never going to – if he was here, he never would have been number 1. But I'm sure how – I'm not sure of anything, but it sure adds up that it was something how he was considering there.
Yeah. And at least from, an outsider perspective, you could understand why the Browns would think, well, we might want to get ahead of them and make this pick.
I mean, they call themselves quarterback factory. So you want to get ahead of the factory.
Poor Howie said that one time in he's talked in how many press conferences, how many minutes. He said one thing one time, and we always bring it up.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's
That's
just
the
like
job.
Jeff Lurie. We want to win multiple championships. It took
The
him
gold standard. Yeah.
Took him how many years to win multiple? He's won multiple championships now.
He never gave a timetable, did he?
No, he did not. And he nailed it.
Mac McWilliams was their 5th round pick after they traded down 145 overall, cornerback from UCF, Central Florida. What do you make of this kid?
A small, he's 5'10". I mean, he's short. He's not small. I mean, he's solid.
They list him 5'10", 191.
Yeah, so he's not small, but he's short. he I'm trying to remember where he started out.
UAB.
UAB. He was terrible there. Apparently, he's just really bad. Um, I was reading this one scout who said his 23 tape at UAB was a mess, but he really worked at it, and he was in a better situation at South Florida, and he played pretty well. And um, there's look, you lose Isaiah Rogers, you lose Slay, you lose um, who's the other corner?
James Bradbury.
James Bradbury. Well, that's not who I say, but there's room for some competition at corner, and he's probably a slot.
Well, he's played inside outside. He actually played outside at UCF, but his makeup
Slot.
is that of an inside corner.
Yeah, and I mean at college, like you can get away. They're going to put you where they need you the most. I mean, he's not an outside corner.
Yeah, probably not. But he was at the Senior Bowl. Another Senior Bowl guy got to show that versatility playing inside and outside. When you talk about him being small, it's not just the height. This doesn't sound like a big deal. His arms are sub 30 inches, which is, I mean, that's 6th percentile. So that's very small. And some corners can kind of make up for a lack of height if they have long arms, because obviously that length is there where you need it. And when you're trying to break up passes, he doesn't have that. So it's not a deal breaker, especially for the Eagles. They've had other corners who are slight in that area, but it's something to keep in mind.
They're 29 and 7/8. It is under 30.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you think he's been like stretching, like, come on, I can't get it to 30?
Just get on the rack, I'm sure the agents have drills for that. Like, we're going to get your arms longer.
So actually one of the things I heard about Kenny Pickett when he was in the pre-draft process, one of the things he had to do because he had those small baby hands everyone talked about, but it wasn't that his hands were small, it was that his thumb, his hands were small, but a big problem was his thumb didn't have normal flexibility. So his thumb couldn't stretch out all the way. So what he would do with his trainer, they would spend time every day stretching his thumb to try to get that measurement bigger.
It's crazy what players will do
Mm-hmm.
to move up a few spots.
Yeah. We did talk to Mac McWilliams. I think the one thing that stood out to me was him talking about how competitive he is. He said that was one of the reasons he really wanted to go to UCF to play different competition. He said he wanted the Senior Bowl was really exciting for him to go against top competition, and he apparently did perform really well there. I wasn't at the Senior Bowl this year, so I can't say firsthand, but reading up on some of the standouts, he was listed among them.
Yeah, you figured there would be a corner at some point, and I like the pick.
Yeah, good speed too. 4.41 at the combine, kind of a baseline thing. You needed that position.
Sure.
All right, next one, round 5, 161. Shocker here. The Eagles go with a Georgia defensive player, Smile Mondon Jr., 6'4", 224, 22 years old, linebacker. Talking about like dimensions, huge wingspan, 80-inch wingspan, 81st percentile.
Yeah, and there were only 66 inches before he got on the wingspan stretcher machine. Yeah, he's apparently very, very close to Nakobe. He said he's friends with all those guys, but Nakobe and him apparently really, really tight.
Makes sense. Same position group. He actually took over for Nakobe and Quay Walker when they went to the NFL.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a comfort zone for. Obviously, they didn't take any Georgia guys in the first round like the last few years, but got to be a comfort zone coming into a place where you can ask guys about the routine, about practice, what the coach is like at practice, about how they meet, about how they watch film, where to live, where to go shopping. You have this. He even mentioned Lewis Seen, who we forget about was a Georgia guy. He's, so.
I don't.
No, you don't. But I think that when we talk about Georgia guys, we're thinking of, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and N'Kobe and Nolan. And Keeley, but Lewisine, he mentioned. I think it's got to be a big positive.
He's the 8th Georgia defensive player on the team.
Yeah, and somebody said 7th when they asked him the question, and it really, like, do you correct a guy in a Zoom call? You probably shouldn't. Probably
It's
bad
bad
form.
form.
I was tempted.
Maybe they forgot Azeez Ojulari.
Could be, probably. Yeah.
That's probably the one. Yeah. But yeah, it is amazing, and it's worked. So why stop it? He's very different. Like if we're talking about Jahad Campbell as a linebacker, which he's either way, he's a very different player than Mondon, who's more of like a coverage type player, not the off the edge. You're not going to walk him down and let him rush. They're very different types of players.
Yes, I'm thinking 6'2", 225. Sound about right?
Yeah, he was 224 at the combine.
That's like the most Dave Zangaro thing ever. Like, yeah, no, he wasn't 225. He was 224.
Well, you just asked me.
I said something like that.
Okay,
I
he
said
is something like that.
6'2", 225, something like that. No, you're way off. He was
I didn't say
224.
that.
You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I mean, most of the conversation with him revolved around the Georgia stuff, and um, yeah.
Yep. Another theme though here: Senior Bowl guy, played
Mhm.
well there. Relative athletic score 9.42. Not quite as high as some of the other guys, but really high. 188 out of over 3,200 in that database.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's a trend. And I mean, the Senior Bowl came right after the Super Bowl. Those guys probably just wanted to celebrate. They were down
Came
in.
before the Super Bowl.
It was it before the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's before.
So I guess they weren't celebrating yet.
Well, I don't know the way they beat them down. Maybe they were already starting to.
Yeah.
Smile, by the way, is how his name is pronounced. It's a weird spelling. It's Smael, and you see that, you panic. It's Smile, which is a nice, easy pronunciation. We all know that word. Some of us do it more than others, but that's how you say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also a Radiohead side project. The Smile.
Glad you got that in. All right. The last 5th round pick, 168 overall, Drew Kendall, center from Boston College. Interestingly, the Eagles, when they announced the pick, called him center/guard Drew Kendall.
Yeah, and the knock on him was that he didn't have guard in him. He wasn't athletic enough to play guard, and everywhere you read about him, center only he was tagged with that. So we'll see. And he was asked about that, and he said, "I think I can play guard." And I mean, I think the Eagles don't draft interior linemen if they don't have that in them, that positional versatility. So they must think he has a chance to get out and be a guard. And we'll see, but not a great athlete. He's a guy that he succeeds with intelligence and savvy and playing hard. Eagles drafted a center from Boston College named Doug Brzezinski, who's really similar. I think he was a 4th rounder, I believe, 99, and I think it was Andy's first draft. And he was really similar that way. He didn't have any traits. He was just a tough, smart, physical dude that loved to mix it up. He just wasn't very athletic. He was in the league 4 or 5 years. So it kind of reminds me of that pick.
6'4", 308, 23 years old, 3 years as a starting center at BC. He said before he went to college, he did play guard. And I found it interesting. He said he actually, in the off season and downtime, he still reps at guard to not lose that, because he says he does feel like he still has that ability.
Yeah, I watched an interview with him at his pro day up in Chestnut Hill, and he said it's really important for me to show teams that I can do both. And it sounds like a lot of his prep before the whole draft process was getting as familiar as he could with guard and and showing that.
I'll have to go back and see. I think when the Eagles drafted McMahon last year, they just called him a center.
Seems right.
Yeah. So, but I think Kendall's obviously center first, and even if he's not center only, I wonder if it's last year when they got in a pickle and Cam Jurgens couldn't play, they had to slide Landon Dickerson over from left guard. They didn't have a true backup center. I wonder if there's a concerted effort here to have a backup center on the roster.
We know Stoutland doesn't like moving pieces around like that. He'd rather have a 1-for-1 replacement. So there could be something to that.
Mm-hmm. The last note on Kendall, his father, Pete, played 13 years in the NFL, long NFL career. That's not nothing.
Yeah, and Howie was actually it was interesting. He said there's a lot of value to them in those bloodlines. But Trot, certainly, and
Mm-hmm.
two guys this year whose dads played 13 years in the league. So yeah, I didn't expect him to answer that way. I thought he should say, it's a quirk or whatever. But these are guys that grew up around the game, and they share that kind of like the game's not new to them. The NFL game's not new. They've been around the locker rooms. They've been around pro players, and they're not intimidated. They grew up around it, and apparently that's something that they value.
Yeah, Miles Hinton, who we'll get to in a minute here, his father also uh, played in the league, played at a high level, and at the same position. So, like, offensive linemen having offensive linemen children, that does make sense. And how he's like, yeah, genetics are a big part of this, and
Yeah.
you understand how it works.
When they say chip off the old block, literally.
Okay. I get it. 6th round. This was a fun pick. The Eagles do draft a quarterback, Kyle McCord from Syracuse. Before that, Ohio State. Before that, St. Joe's Prep. Before that, Mount Laurel native. Pretty cool story.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get over the fact that he didn't go to Lenape. It's bugging me. It's eating at me. But yeah, and I think they threw the ball more than any other BCS school last year. They chucked it all over the. It's not the Carrier Dome anymore. It has a new name. I don't know what the new name is. It's still the Carrier Dome to me. But he threw a lot of passes, and I think he led the country in yards. He spoke, and I watched an interview with him, and we talked to him later, where he just said, when you throw as much as we do, you just get really, really comfortable throwing the football, and to be in this league, it's something you got to be pretty good at. So, not shocked they took a quarterback, and we talked about this. I think, he'll compete for the 3, and
That'll be a fun competition, too, because 2 very different quarterbacks.
yeah, and I think, did he say he worked out with Dorian Thompson-Robinson?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, so they worked out together, and now they're going to compete together to compete against each other. I would think this kid has the edge, but yeah, you got to see it. First Syracuse quarterback they've had since, what was that guy's name? Don McPherson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's it. This made me laugh when I was thinking about it today.
I know
the
it's
draft.
Donovan McNabb, by the way, is just a joke.
Yes.
No cards and letters.
Before the draft, I was kind of giving you crap about all your South Jersey talk. And then the Eagles go and draft 2 players out of their 10 from South Jersey.
Yeah. So that's now we're up to 120 as Raku, obviously. So 125 now.
Yeah. Frazier went today.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay. 126 South Jersey draft picks. And you don't want to know how long it took me to research that.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a complete ridiculous waste of time, but it was fun.
All right. 3 more 6th round picks. We're a lot of players to talk about here. Miles Hinton, offensive tackle from Michigan, 6'6", 325, 23 years old, began his college career at Stanford, then went to Michigan. What do you think about this kid?
Yeah, and he had trouble. His credits from Stanford didn't transfer over to Michigan, and that was a real issue there for him. Yeah, I've seen him listed at 6'6" and a half, 6'7". He's a huge dude. Um, Really kind of a late like he didn't he's a guy that didn't love ball, and he talked about this. I read an interview with him where he said, I when I got out of high school, I didn't even know if I wanted to keep playing. Now the dude's 6'6", 6'7", 325. Imagine being that size, and I just didn't know how much I loved the game, and he really grew to love it and got pretty good at it. So um, you figured they were going to take a tackle at some point. They took a couple. Um, this is a project for Stout, and he's not a finished product. And Stout loves these kind of guys.
Yeah, he's less of a project than the next guy, though. Um, but before we move on to the next guy, uh, Hinton played on both sides of the line, so has some swing tackle potential. The Eagles brought in Kendall Lamb, and he's a veteran. If he's healthy, I think he's clearly the swing tackle, but that's a 1 year deal, and that is an important spot to have that backup tackle in place. So if you have a chance that this guy could be that in a year, it's worth the pick.
Yeah.
He's known for his quick feet, has that kind of athleticism. I think he'll be a nice addition to Stoutland University.
Yeah, and I mean the knock on him was inconsistency and not always having the aggression that he needed to have at that position, and something he's going to have to develop quickly.
Uh,
Losing Fred Johnson was a really underrated. That was a big loss. Yeah,
sure.
comfort level with him.
Uh, a little bit later, 207 in the sixth round, Cameron Williams, offensive tackle from Texas, 6'6", 330, 21 years old, skipped his senior season. To me, this seems like maybe a case that kid got some bad advice to enter the draft because he has all the tools, but clearly like has work left to do, and now he's going to have to do it at the NFL level. But you know, he was projected by a lot of people in the fourth round, so at least by that metric, this is pretty good value in the sixth.
Yeah, he just hasn't played much football. I think he started one game before this past year, and he started. I believe he started 12 or 13 this year, but just hasn't played a lot. And yeah, he's got some work to do, technique wise and strength wise. But yeah, you get him in, you enroll him in Stout. It's good seeing Stout today. Had a chance to say hi to Stout. Um, so yeah, it's a project.
He's huge.
He's a big dude.
35-inch arms, 85-inch wingspan, uh, 11 and 3/8 inch hands. Think about that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
that's
massive.
yeah. I mean that alone, there's just his stature and his traits is going to give him. He'll have a chance to develop. It just might take some time. Right
Yeah,
tackle type of guy.
yeah, but man, like you give that guy to Stout, and you say, look, no guarantee it works out. We sometimes we talk about Stout like he's a wizard. He's not.
Yes, he is.
He's a football coach, and they don't all hit, but his rate is so much higher than other coaches in the league that it's totally worth spending a 6th round pick on a player like this.
He is a wizard. I think he's a wizard.
Okay, I'm not gonna.
He's not literally a wizard. Like he doesn't have that wizard hat.
Yeah,
He doesn't have a wand. He's not like, he's not in
well, that's what a
Gryffindor.
wizard is.
No, the wizard has multiple meanings. You can be a wizard without the accoutrements.
Is it accoutrements or accoutrement? Isn't that
Depends
like
if you're in France or in New Jersey.
okay? Uh, last pick of the Eagles draft, 209 overall. They kept these. I was wondering what they were going to do. At this point, it didn't really make sense to trade back again, just take some players. And they did. Antoine Powell Ryland, edge player from Virginia Tech, 6'2, 258, 23 years old, super productive.
Yeah, I mean the production was over the last 2 years. He had more sacks than anybody in the BCS, and more tackles for a loss. I think he was tied. Um, but yeah, I mean the traits aren't really there. He He's a really clever pass rusher who has a great plan. He knows how to vary his moves, and he's got a lot of moves in his arsenal. He just doesn't have a ton of talent. So what he gets through being smart, being instinctive, being clever, preparation. You just wonder how that's going to translate to playing on Sundays.
Yeah, I read all that, and then I looked at his testing numbers. I don't know, 4.69, 36.5-inch vertical, broad jump of 10.4. Like the raw athleticism numbers are there. I think the knock on him is like the get off isn't there, and like the quick twitch might not be there, but in terms of like the pure athleticism and he checks some boxes, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get, well, I think he had 9.5 sacks 2 years ago and 16 this year. I believe 25.5 sacks the last 2 years.
Yeah.
32 tackles for loss, I believe. So yeah, it's hard to ignore the production.
All right, so those are the Eagles draft picks. I just realized we're 46 minutes into this. We haven't taken a break. So let's take a quick break, and
Can I
then
just
we
say
will
one thing
wrap
before we
up.
take a break? Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Merriam-Webster defines a wizard as a very clever or skillful person, in addition to the one skilled in magic definition, worthy of the highest praise, a wise man. So there's multiple definitions of wizard, and I believe Jeff Stoutland qualifies under multiple definitions.
See, this is one of those things where the dictionary gets beaten down by people and the colloquialisms end up in the dictionary. I bet you that wasn't part of the definition 50 years ago.
Jeff Stoutland wasn't coaching 50 years ago.
I didn't say he was.
Okay. You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we've got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store and nissanusa.com today.
All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. Reuben, Frank, Dave Zangaro. 10 picks, none of them tight ends. And we had a chance to talk to Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni after the press conference, or after the draft in their press conference. And Dallas Goedert came up again. What do you think? Do you think it's more likely today that Dallas Goedert is on the team because they didn't draft a tight end?
I guess so, but maybe it also gives him, a little more leverage. Maybe his price goes up now and makes it tougher to keep him. I don't know. I think every day that goes by without them doing something with him, you start to think maybe they're going to find a way to work this out. The fact he's still on the roster, I just can't imagine he's got any trade value. He's 30. He gets hurt a lot. Maybe there's a team that didn't get a tight end that needs
Yeah, I know
one.
one, the Eagles.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Nick said we love having him on, or Howie, I guess, said we love having him on the team. You're trying to look into what they're saying, and obviously Howie's not going to comment on the contract situation, but I think it's a little more likely now than it was. Yes.
Yeah, I do too, and I think we're getting really close to the point where it's like, yeah, it's going to benefit both sides.
Yes.
If he's here, figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be a number that makes sense for Dallas, that makes sense for the team, and I don't know what that number is. Maybe it's $7.5 million. I don't know, but there's got to be a number.
Yeah, and yeah, I think this is one of the cases where no matter what, it made sense for the Eagles to draft a tight end if it fell their way. But I do think that without them drafting one, they're not in a position to go into the season with what they have. If Goddard's not a part of it.
Totally agree.
Like Harrison Bryant's an okay player. Kylan Granson's an okay player, I guess. But like, this is a team where the tight end played a big role in the playoffs and they won a Super Bowl and they have a really good roster and they should be competitive again this year. They should be contenders. To risk that over a few $1 million seems kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and I mean the Eagles tight ends, if you add up their production, obviously Dallas missed a lot of games. Their tight ends had over 1,000 yards last year. Jalen Hurts loves throwing to the tight end, so it's important.
Anything else from the Nick and Howie presser that kind of caught your attention?
We talked about the genetic stuff. I'll have to go through it. I mean, there was some interesting stuff there, but nothing that really jumped out at me.
For the record, Howie was asked about Jordan Davis's fifth-year option. Didn't say much other than we like Jordan.
I don't know why they wouldn't. I can't think of a reason not to.
Yeah, it's I think typically they don't love the idea of a fifth-year option because it's a chunk of cap and money in 1 year, and that's not typically the way they operate. But it's also not super cumbersome, right? It's like 13
Exactly.
mil
Yeah.
for defensive tackle. I'm leaning that they would do that, but there's also a chance they just work out a deal as well.
I still think that's the most likely scenario. They work out a long-term deal. I think
Long
it's a
term.
good, like a 3-year contract. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And just,
You could also work out a deal where, you extend him, Jordan gets some money, but it's not all locked into that year.
you could do that as well. And I think those things both make more sense than the 5th-year option.
But the thing about it is there's a deadline and it's not looming anymore. It's approaching pretty rapidly, May 2nd.
Yeah, and I believe that would be what's today, the 26th. How many days in April? I mean, it's next week. So, yeah, they got to get it done.
I'm looking through my notes here. I don't know. I don't think there's much else. They did the thing again this year, which is a really nice gesture. They bring in everyone from the building who plays any kind of role. That's when you mentioned we saw Stout. That's where we saw him. They actually no, we saw him before, didn't we?
Well, he was in there for Jackson's presser.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get a chance to talk to him. Got a chance to say hi to him and Bobby King and Vic.
Yeah.
Can't interview him. Not allowed.
But they all rolled in. It's every coach, every scout that's in the building, the cafeteria workers. It's the PR staff. It's basically everyone who's in the building. They bring them all up there and put them on the stage or in front of the stage, and they take a photo. Look, it's a little hokey, but I think it's a really cool gesture.
Yeah, and I think it's something Howie never would have thought of his first go round as GM. I just think he's learned so much about how to deal. And then he talked about it. He talked about how important these people are. And Nick and I are the ones taking the questions, but everybody's got a role in it. That's not the old Howie. I mean, Howie's just grown so much as a person. I think he never would have even thought of doing a picture like that. And then he said, as long as Nick and I are here, we're going to do that every year.
Yeah, it's like a school photo. It's a cool look. It's a really cool idea.
It was like, how many people were there? Got to be about 120 people.
Yeah, and it was funny. I'm sitting there and Dom's watching them all walk in. He's like, "Oh my, who are all these people?"
And we were talking about
Yeah.
I think one of us said to Howie, like, who could name, or Howie said who could name the most, who could identify the most people. We all quickly agreed it was Zach Berman.
Yeah, I think I'd be top 5.
Yeah, I'd be in the bottom.
You think so?
I'm not good with names.
Okay.
I just learned your Dave like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, speaking of names, Andrew Makuba goes by Drew.
Interesting. Okay.
He prefers that. I don't think it's like he hates Andrew, but he does go by Drew. That's what his friends call him. That's what his teammates call him. That's what I'm going to call him.
Okay. Drew.
Yeah. It was good to meet him in person. Didn't get into a ton of stuff with him of substance, but he was in the building. Eyes still a little wide. It's so funny. Like these guys get drafted, they get on the plane, they're in Philadelphia, and it's like, what's going on here? They're in front of us, but he brought up Kayvon Wallace, which I love a Kayvon Wallace mention.
I thought Kayvon was going to be pretty good.
I did too.
Yeah.
But he also mentioned Brian Dawkins because he played at Clemson before playing at Texas.
I thought he was going to be pretty good.
You were right about that one. It was a fun draft, man.
It was. It didn't go the way I expected. I didn't think they would pick 10 players, certainly.
There were some surprises along the way.
I really would have thought they would have gotten a tight end at some point. And Howie said, look, we were close on a couple times, and it just, the value to move just There wasn't anybody where we were picking, and the value to move, the cost was excessive, and just didn't happen. I appreciate that we talk about drafting, for need. They need a tight end, and he didn't reach for one. And that's being true to your board. And that's, when you start chasing guys, that's when you get yourself into trouble. And he just does not do that. And the fact that they didn't draft a tight end tells you that.
I also appreciated that he said, it's the end of the draft. He's like, I got to go and look at who we drafted. He didn't even know how many players they drafted today.
No, he didn't.
Which I kind of get that. Like, I feel the same way. And I'm not the one who has to make all these split-second decisions and trade. And so I think there is a period where, and it wasn't even right away because they're already signing undrafted free agents, which I think they have 10 spots available. If my math is right, they had 71 players coming in, but one of them's Lakin Vakalehi, who has the international exemption. They drafted 10, so pretty easy math. I appreciate the round numbers.
Yeah,
90 minus 10, yeah.
And we have an undrafted free agent tracker up on the site now, so that's always fun seeing those names. You recognize a couple, and wow, he didn't get drafted.
Yeah, and then we'll really find out what they thought of them how much they paid those guys.
That's right. And one of those guys is going to make the team, most likely, maybe two.
Yeah, they've gotten some nice hits. Reed Blankenship recently was a really good one for them.
Yeah,
Ben Van Sumeren.
Yeah.
Did you like my Ben Van Sumeren joke the other night?
It was pretty good.
It was good.
Yeah, I know you're really proud of it, and I know you're going to share it with everyone now.
Well, now I have to.
Yeah, you do.
I just said Jacksonville traded up to get their Ben Van Sumeren when they traded up to get Travis Hunter.
Because they both played both sides of the ball.
Yep. That's it. Oh, speaking of players who play both sides of the ball, Ty Robinson played some fullback.
Yes, he did.
In college. He said they ran that play with him at fullback 8 times and they scored 7.
Yes, he did. So might have if they do ever ban the tush push, might have an alternative.
I like that. All right, you got any final words here before we wrap this up? I'm delirious.
No, I think we talked about maybe just doing a mailbag pod in the near future, maybe next week. We'll figure that out, but we'll do one soon.
Yeah, and if you have a question for us, eagleeye@nbcuni.com. I did check the mail box today. We do have some draft questions, so we will get to them next week. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. If you say, hey, I appreciated you guys doing a podcast all 3 days of the draft, it would be very nice if you had to give us a 5-star review. That helps us in ways that I don't understand because I'm not smart enough to. Any final words here, Rube?
No, it's been a fun few days and we're not going away.
All right. For Reuben Frank, I'm Dave Zangaro. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.